It is 5 o'clock, so I will call this meeting of the Finance and Personnel Committee to order. Will you all please stand and join me in the pledge? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to the roll call. Alder Ackley?
Here.
Alder Feldy?
Here.
Alder Flicky-Paneski?
Here.
Alder Perella? Here. Chair is here, 5 out of 5. We have a quorum. We'll jump over introductions today, barring any objection, and move straight into item number 5, approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the minutes. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye. The ayes have it, and the motion passes. With that, we are on to item number 6, which is RO number 145 of 2122, by the city clerk submitting a claim from Troy Shaw for alleged damages to his Gamma Mach 1 air rifle by the Sheboygan Police Department. Attorney Adams.
So we've paid this claim, and so the recommendation is to file.
Questions, comments, motions? We'll be looking for a motion to file on this one.
I move to file.
All right, we have a motion and a second, then seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye, the ayes have it, and the motion passes. With that, we are on to item 7, which is RC number 265 of 2122, by the Finance and Personnel Committee, to whom was referred RO number 135 of 2122, by City Clerk submitting a claim from Geico Casualty Company for alleged damages that occurred to a motor vehicle, or rather that occurred after a motor vehicle accident between Colin McCauley and the City of Sheboygan fire truck.
This is one that we've actually denied this claim, and so we're looking for filing.
Questions, comments, motions on this?
I have one. And fire truck have its siren on and lights? I mean, how did this happen?
Yeah, I don't have all that detail with me. It was not, as I recall, it was not during a lights and siren issue, but the reason that we denied it had to do more with legal issues around when the claim was filed, those kinds of things. They missed their deadlines.
Okay. Motion to file.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on this one. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye, the ayes have it, and the motion passes. With that, we are on to item number 8, which is RC number 266 of 2122. By the Finance and Personnel Committee, to whom was referred RO number 122 of 2122, by City Clerk submitting a claim of unlawful tax from Reinhardt Attorneys at Law regarding the 2 parcels that are included on the agenda, or Mid-State Amusement Games LLC.
We've also denied this claim, and so we're looking for filing.
Questions or comments on this claim? Motion?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, then seeing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye, the ayes have it, and the motion passes. With that, we are on to item number 9, which is a direct referral of RO number 26 of 2223, submitting report in response to a request for direction from the Finance and Personnel Committee on the steps moving forward to complete the compensation study and wage scale adoption.
Good evening. As you all know, the compensation study results and the wage schedule that was presented was brought back to or referred back to this committee. So today I am just asking for clear direction from this body to get us to the finish line on this project. I had listed a number of items that were brought up during the Common Council and previous finance and personnel meetings, but I did want to just open up some conversations so that myself, Administrator Wolf, and anyone else who would be involved in finishing this project has clear direction on what it would take.
And just adding on to that, I think it's important that we focus on be clear what the ask is from us. I know we had a short but fairly robust discussion during last week's council meeting already, but if we can somewhat narrow down exactly, I guess, what we need to see before we're comfortable voting on a final adoption of this plan or one similar to it. I believe that is the goal
Right.
for our outcome today. And with that, I'll ask anybody who'd like to start.
Thank you. For my part, and it was fairly well documented in the referral that we have in front of us, I particularly want to see in the chambers a representative from Carlson Detman, who I don't think it's fair that the city staff has to defend what Carlson Detman did. I think Carlson Detman should be here to do that. So that's one of my major things. And then Alder Decker also, and it's not in here, but he also said when we pass this, it needs to be retroactive to July 1. And I know there was some pushback about that. So that is not included in here. So that's another thing that we probably should consider. But I thought these were pretty well enumerated. There are 8 of them, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Alder Feldy.
I mean, when the council got together and went over findings from Carlton Detman, it was clear that by the end of it, we thought nothing should happen until we have a finance director in there.
Personnel director.
I'm sorry, personnel. I'm looking right at Caitlin saying, a personnel director in there, because that's the person that's going to have to deal with a lot of the people that aren't satisfied with it. That's it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Alder Perella.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to reiterate the ask from the colleagues about the presence of the firm to answer a few questions. Also about the question on the retroactive payment, but I also would like to make sure to include and any further steps to be taken and being implemented only when an HR director is in place. And I believe that the JDQs and the discussion on the individual jobs should be revised, possibly through the work of a committee or a group, including the directors, the leads, the superintendents that are to whom the individuals, the different positions reports to. So as a collaborative effort and to create the opportunity to open up any questions, and most of all, the question of what is it is missing in the different individual job descriptions that made it belonging or pertaining to a specific grade, meaning giving the opportunity to individuals or for each job description, what is it is missing in that job description that would make the next grade? Not to make up whatever is missing, but rather to understand what is it makes a difference, and then trying to capture everything in that description that may have not been captured due to different reasons. So in other words, a group effort led by an HR director to revise, review the different job descriptions, making sure that all the questions are answered. And I personally would like to incorporate also the ask of, as an employer, to think of guaranteeing a $15 minimum wage.
Thank you, Alder Perella. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I just want to press a little harder just on kind of what staff are asking for. And we're not getting a lot of direction from this committee or the council right now. We're not necessarily completing the thought. You are telling us that, okay, we want an HR director. We need a lot more guidance in terms of what does that look like. And this is the committee with the jurisdiction over this project. So just, we really, what does that look like for this committee? Now, we're not quite sure, and some alders have different comments that they are making. We're not necessarily quite sure if this is the council or the committee speaking or the individual alders. So I just want to use the HR director for an example. Would the committee be satisfied if all of a sudden it's the HR director's first day, we throw them at this? Do we wait 3 months to onboard them? Do we wait, what does that look like? So we need more direction. We need more follow through and the complete thought on some of these points that the council and committee is making. We hear some kind of non-committal things. We'd like you to consider a $15 wage. Okay, we'll consider it, but what does that benchmark look like for us? So just for all these points on the document, and I hope you all had a chance to look at it too, we need more concrete direction from the council in terms of what this looks like. And I know our finance director can talk about what the financial implication will be on a lot of this stuff too, the longer that we wait as well too. So, we talk about communication of the process, how much more communication, what are you looking, it's just, this is where our minds are. So just please, I guess I'm speaking for a lot of the department heads and supervisors as well. We just need more complete thoughts. So we hear your bullet points, but now what are the next steps? What's the level of satisfaction going to be on this? Because I know a lot of staff are waiting kind of with bated breath in terms of what this looks like and what your expectations are for us moving forward. So just some more food for thought. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just add a few comments to jump off of the mayor's comments. I would agree with some direction on the HR director piece. I personally would not have wanted to jump on this project day one, even if this was my background, considering the discussions that have gone on and, some of the frustration that is happening with employees, supervisors, things like that. I would hope that we, as a city, would want to have this HR director come on, get their feet kind of on the ground, and also comfortable with individuals that they're interacting with before they get dumped into this project. But the other side of me says that if we're waiting 3 months, the retro pay will become even more of an issue, because if we are paying next year in 2023 for pay that should have been paid in 2022, we're going to run into penalties and fines from WRS, for example, because we are not paying when we should have been paying. And then the other part of me thinks too, when are we getting an HR director? Because I know the finance director, that was open, I believe, 6 full months before I started. So we're not going to get an HR director tomorrow. I know that's posted, but it's not going to be happening overnight as much as we would love that to happen. So some direction on if we don't get an HR director in the next 2 months, would an HR specialist who we can hire just for this project, would that be an acceptable other option? Somebody with that HR professional background that can kind of weed through. Hopefully, they've maybe been through this process before. That could be looked at as well, if that's an option that this committee would look at. And then with the back pay or retro pay, I will say I just was talking to our payroll specialist downstairs, and the police contract that settled past the beginning of the year, it took 2 full days for that process for retro pay to be run through the system, and that was with scales already set. So we're going from letters to numbers, but also we're creating these scales that don't exist yet. So the retro pay in our system will not work. I did talk to Munis last week at our user group to see if that was something that could be worked on. The next version we're moving to has that capability, and it would be much easier if we go to that version. We are moving to that version in August. However, any payrolls that are run before that, it probably will not work for. So it's going to be a lot of manual labor, and it was 2 days for the police where it wasn't as manual of labor. It was really the system ran a lot of it, and we were checking and just making sure everything was flowing properly. So it would be a huge ask and undertaking for the retro pay to be done. Those are my comments at the moment.
Thank you. Alder Flicky-Beneski?
Sure, thank you. Am I on? Yeah.
Yes.
When I heard Alder Perella talk about we should go back to the JDQs, we should go back to the job descriptions, I then took my personnel hat off and I put my financial hat on and thought that's going to take a really long time, and how long do we want to extend this? So my head was already partway through. We're going to face a fiscal wall next year with our budget, and we don't have a whole lot of elasticity in it if we have to come up with a year and a half's worth of payrolls in a year, plus the increase. I keep saying this wage study as it exists adds another $1 million a year to our payroll. So I'm a little bit leery. I would be content with an HR person who has been through this process before, who can move it along and can act as the liaison to a permanent HR person. But, for me, I just need to hear from Carlson Detman. I do have confidence in what was done. I've been through it 3 times now, and I have confidence that it is as accurate as it can be, and there will be quirks in the system, so we can iron those out. But I think I hesitate to say, let's do the whole project over again. And that's kind of how I'm feeling about some of this. So I don't want to do the whole project over again. I want to keep this project moving and moving forward as expeditiously as possible. So, thank you.
Thank you. And keeping with the theme of getting more tangible with our asks, having Carlson Detman here in person.
Yes.
I guess trying to stick to one subject at a time so we don't jump around too much. We've been talking about the HR director or specialist a bit, which, at least to me, the specialist sounds like it would be a great benefit. Any committee members have any other thoughts on exactly what they'd like to see in that area?
Yes, I wanted to also answer the mayors on that, and the director of finance. I do agree that it may take time. However, I believe that this could be one of the first projects of an HR director. This would give actually the opportunity of going department by department and getting to know everybody and discuss with everybody. It will not be easy, obviously, because it's a huge entertaining endeavor to start with, but it's not something, I don't think we would need to wait months for someone to get familiar with everything before they could start working on this project. I think that if we hire the right person, it could happen in the first month or 2 months. I think it would be possible to task an experienced HR director with this project fairly soon. Obviously, yes, we have to come up, I appreciate that, we have to come up with some type of threshold timeline, and I would accept if a professional figure that if we go, for example, this happens to, if we want to give it a timeline of 2 months as an example, I would accept, I think it is acceptable to have a professional doing that. And what I'm envisioning is that the HR director or the professional in this case would need to lead the effort of meeting the managers, the leaders, the directors, the superintendents, and look at those JDQs to understand what's the degree of those JDQ being really reflective of what's happening in those positions. So I agree that we cannot start from the start, from scratch, but we have to give the opportunity to look again what we should have done from the start, to look at those positions again, to answer questions and so on. So the HR director or professional should lead that effort together with the individual leaders or department heads and managers and so on. And then we can decide if the HR director may need the support of someone else in their team, obviously. I wish that the firm was open to be an active actors in that process, and I don't know how that could be contemplated from the financial standpoint, because obviously this was not included with the agreement, but I wish that the firm was part of that process together with the HR professional, director or professional, to lead those efforts. And I'm thinking of group meetings, department by departments, and checking on those descriptions. And so if the firm was there to be able to answer any questions that comes up in those situations, in those meetings, that would be ideal. But I don't know if that, and I don't know that we can have that answer right now, if that is even a possibility.
We have reached out to Patrick or Carlson Detman to kind of let him know where we are at in this process and some of the concerns that came up. It would more than likely cost additional money to have him come in, but he was going to kind of brainstorm on what that could look like for us. We don't have an answer today on that because obviously he's not here and Todd is not here either. So we did have that conversation to see if that would be something he would be willing to, or Carlson Detman would be willing to get involved in. I know that he did bring up that we already kind of went through a round of this with the department heads. So he asked me to have clear direction from this body, again, to say, if we've already gone through one set of review of the job descriptions with department heads, how does it need to look differently to make it acceptable?
Alder Feldy?
That was my ask. Could we just do a percent across the board this year, and maybe next year look at, take more time and do it right? Could we do it that way?
I guess I'll jump in with just an opinion on that one.
I'll take your opinion.
Do with it as you will. With the way that we were somewhat trying to translate every position into a language that works across all areas and then figure out how they fit into RTO, I can't see any way it's not just going to get even more expensive to implement this next year if we move. Let's say we end up with pretty much the draft that we had originally, but now we're jumping at whatever percent starting out. My worry is how feasible it would be for us, since I know it's already, the proposal in front of us is a bit, I don't want to say not untenable because the numbers are all working, but it's a bit tight implementing it as is. So I just want us to be very cautious before we make any decisions that are going to end up making the final plan not even be able to work in the long term.
Okay.
Bert?
Sure. And I'd just like to double bunk on that. By adding a percentage across the board, we don't do any of the corrective measures to ameliorate the inequities that are already in many of the jobs. So I think that would not be okay with me. I would vote that one down.
Thank you. Alder Decker?
I guess my one quick question, I don't know how anyone feels about this or anything like that. My concern, I guess, is is getting things moving forward. As we are losing a lot of employees that are jumping ship because of, some of the inequities. Would paying a bonus at this time just to kind of, as a bridge to get us to this, would that be untenable? Would that be something that people would be, open to at this time? I mean, just to get us the bridge, to get us to when we do get this finally done? That's, I guess, my question on that.
I may lean on Attorney Adams on this one because I do know that the city has had issues in the past with certain lump sum type payments, so I would not want to get us in legal trouble on that one.
Yeah.
It's legal to do. It's also extremely difficult to do because that lump sum impacts over time, it impacts all those other calculations. And the reason we were sued a couple of years ago is because the calculations weren't done right. So is it legal to do? Yes. Do I have confidence that it will be done correctly? I think I have more confidence today because of our professional finance staff that they'll get it done right. Do I have confidence that all the work that would get put onto them would allow them to also do all their other work that they have to do? Probably not, because there's only 168 hours in a week.
Thank you. Mayor?
So, I guess that, it's not necessarily a motion, but I guess that's just kind of out of order in just the sense of what we're looking at right now. The biggest sense of why we hired Carlson Detman was to kind of look at the market and seeing where we are in terms of how we pay our positions. So I guess Chuck does a better job at explaining it legally, and it's my job to kind of explain it in the sense of the political process of that. The reason why the council unanimously voted to support us going forward with the Carlson Detman study was to look at the market in terms of where we are in paying positions in that. So I just kind of wanted to add that tidbit in terms of that component and then how we readjust the pay scales moving forward. So just to provide that context too. And again, if we're going to have that discussion, again, we need to know more about what the full thought is. Okay, is this a percentage base? Is a percentage based on what we got from Carlson Detman? Is just this, everyone gets the same amount? So just making sure that we're figuring that through. So that's all I got. I don't want to say too much more.
Thank you. follow up on
Well,
Sam's
just a quick
update.
follow, yeah, just,
Yeah.
I guess I'm just looking for a bridge to get us to this, you know, so that the people aren't waiting. That's what I was looking at. If there was a way to make a bridge to get us to, if it's gonna take 3 months and not have any, you know, if we're gonna wait 3 months, that's 3 more, you know, if we give them something to kind of go, here's a carrot to kind of keep you happy for now until we can actually get this finished. That was my thought on it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't, I just was kind of spitballing something out there and that's it, so.
Mayor?
I yield.
Okay, I'm going to try to keep us on our bulleted list. I'm trying to keep track of all the conversation. Changing subjects a little bit, jumping back to HR resource, professional involvement. What I was hearing at least is everybody wants there to be an HR professional involved in the process. I didn't hear any pushback on that being a specialist being brought on specifically for this project, but also I don't want to speak for anybody else if I misheard.
Okay.
All right, I don't see any disagreement on that one. Requesting for a council meeting with representatives on site. I believe Alder Flicky-Pineski already solidified that one as one of the asks. And again, I'll ask the entire committee, are there any differing opinions on that one?
Mr. Chairman? Just for clarification, I think just with that point, since this is back in the committee level, I think it would be more conducive to have the Carlson-Detman representative present at this committee. But that's just the mayor's thoughts.
That'd be fine with me.
I would be okay with either if it was being
There are
presented at this
rules with the
committee.
council that limits Alder speaking, and this is where we can have more questions, more conversation, and more fruitful, you know, we can get our hands more dirty on it, so.
This makes good sense to me.
Yeah.
I'd welcome a full table at a committee meeting.
Sure.
All right, then moving on to the third point. This one, I don't think we've touched on a lot yet. One of the more nebulous items, the communication of the process and results to both council and staff. Do we have any ideas of what a resolution to that concern would look like?
I believe we would address that if I believe we would be able to address that point if we are going to adopt the concept of revisiting with a group, revisiting the job descriptions or the JDQs with an appropriate group, because I think that would make up for the lack of communications of which I think we have experienced in the first phase. So as far as communication, I think that would be addressed depending on what decision we make tonight. Which proposal we come up tonight. If we are able to provide those venues of discussion at this phase, then I think we would address that point.
Thank you. The JDQs have been a point that came up a couple times. I guess, Director Krieger, would you mind walking us through exactly what had already happened so far with those, just for a compare and contrast, maybe for what the final ask would be?
Sure. So actually, I think it was day one I started here. I was handed my department's JDQs that had already been filled out and told to review them and make sure they were correct. So employees had the opportunity to fill these out back in the May of 2021 and part of June. I believe people were finishing up. And so they were asked to fill those out. Then they went to the supervisors who also were to review them, make any adjustments. There was a section for notes from the supervisor if they thought something was missing, if they thought something was overstated for what the person did. Then they also were to fill out the level of education that was required, not necessarily what the person has in the position, but what is required, the minimum experience, again, what's required of the job. So it's not necessarily looking at the person, but it's looking at the position and what the minimum requirements of that position would be. So after that, Human Resources received all of those, and it is my understanding that they were to be reviewed by Human Resources. I was not involved at that point, so I can't say how much of a review happened by the Human Resources Department, and don't have anyone to ask at the moment. So I would assume that they were reviewed before they were turned into Carlson Detman. From there, I believe it was in August, that Carlson Detman had the opportunity to sit with all the department heads and review the job description and kind of, they didn't necessarily go through every job description, but they would ask questions. I know I was asked questions because I was actually going through a bit of a restructure in the finance department and realigning some of the duties to make a little more sense. So I sat with Carlson Detman and reviewed what everybody was doing and any changes that may have happened since the JDQ got turned in, or hit on any points that maybe would be different for Sheboygan Finance Department or whatever department was presenting or working with Carlson Detman at the time. So I know those meetings all occurred, I believe, between August and September. There may have been some wrap up of that. And so then after that, Carlson Detman went and did their thing and started doing all of the analysis and doing comparables with the market and our other similar municipalities.
Thank you. Alder Flicky-Paneski?
Thank you. Just briefly going back to the communications, I think if the chair is agreeable, I think if we have an item on our docket every finance meeting for update wage study, we'll be sure to get it. So you might want to consider that moving forward.
That is fair. I would not be opposed.
And I apologize for jumping back in, but I also wanted just to mention that Administrator Wolf and I, and then the HR consultant was in a few of the meetings. We did bring the draft wage scale to the department heads and met with them, and also showed them the potential change based on our implementation guidelines that we were proposing. And so they had an opportunity at that point to give us any positions that were kind of red flags. We wanted to make sure that the wage scale got, this is back to communication, which is why I'm bringing it up. We posted it in the Common Council packet on purpose so that everyone would get it at the same time, so that there wasn't just more gossip type on, oh, I saw it and you're getting this, or I saw this. And so we did it purposefully so that everyone got to see it at the same time. So the we met with the department heads in hopes of avoiding any of the big things that should have been reviewed before it went public on the Common Council agenda. With that, we did have a couple job descriptions that were reviewed. I did send them out to the department heads that had concerns, and they did communicate back if there was something missing at that time, if there was education missing, things like that. So we did have some of that review happen before it did go public on the agenda.
Thank you. Director Beeble?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think overall, I think there's been some pretty good things with the study thus far. And the questions that, at least from a Department of Public Works, and that's where I'm speaking from, is I think some of the things can be easily corrected. I work with consultants all the time, and we have dialogue back and forth. And I'm just going to give an analogy of if we hired a consultant, an engineer, for instance, and they were designing a project for us, and we sat down as a group at the table, and we noticed, yeah, about 80% of this plan's really good. We like it. But we know there's 20% bad. And if we're a consultant to say, well, we have an appeals process, let's just put it through. Let's build the project. Don't worry about it. That's called change orders, and just going out with a not a good design, and then you pay for it on the backside. And I think what we're trying to do through this process is that we know at least from the Department of Public Works, we've identified certain areas that looking at the market and looking at how we structure the department and the work that we do, some of these could be easily fixed if we had an opportunity to have that dialogue. And that's all we're asking for. And I compliment Caitlin and Todd for initiating this and pushing this through. It's needed. But when there's things that need to be corrected and they're not, and we don't have a good dialogue with a consultant that is the so-called expert, sitting down and having a genuine discussion to correct things, that's when it gets to this process and questions are raised. So that's kind of the analogy I'm trying to say is that, hey, we're not that far off. I don't think it should have to take 3 months. If there's a genuine opportunity to sit down with a consultant and go through these items, fix them, it should not take that long. That's my commentary.
Thank you. Garrett, go ahead.
That was what I was going to tell you.
Thank you for recognizing me. Just a couple things in the whole process, first of all. The directors were given basically the whole study and the results of that for 10 days approximately. However, we were not allowed to talk to our staff about them. And so as a larger department, I'm sure Director Biebel doesn't know exactly what's going on between each of his supervisors and each of his staff. Even though we were asked to go and make sure everything was still correct, I don't know exactly what's changed between a certain employee and each supervisor, and that's what was asked of us. We weren't allowed to talk to the employees at that time. So that was one problem. I just thought it would be useful for us to actually have the conversation with the staff, and then it was released. So it was released to everyone, and they learned about their positions on the new software that we've got for not the new board docs, Muni Code. And so for me, it was having my staff typing each other and telling them that, did you see what that position's doing? So that was a rough way to do it. I thought we should be involved and have staff involved ahead of time before everybody in the public was announced on it. But the real problem that I've gotten at, what really hasn't been stated, as Mayor's been saying about nuts and bolts, as a supervisor, I need to be able to explain people why they were rated what they were rated, and that information's not been given out. Okay, I can't see when a person at the city hall is making more money than a person at the library, my department, why is that? So, and I had a conversation with a young man that's gonna make $12.71. He was excited about that, but he still says he's probably leaving. He says he can go anywhere else and get $15 an hour. So that's part of the problem is I can't explain to him, what the comparables were, so I would like to see comparables. Because on the slides that we saw from the Detmans, Carlson Detman, they said we would be compared to external, to internal roles as well. And obviously I'm saying that for the entry-level positions, it should be there's a market rate as well. And as I told the consultant when we had our meeting in the fall, I haven't had a single cleaner or page ever come from La Crosse or Appleton to come work for $9 an hour. Okay, I'm hiring from the street down the road. I don't have people coming from outside of the city. I'm basically hiring from within this pool, so I'm competing with Quick Trip and Piggly Wiggly and the rest of those. That's where I'm competing against, but I didn't hear any of that in the study. The other thing that the study talked about was a rating system. Each individual job would have a rating system. I think that would be important for maybe not the council to see, but at least the managers to see, to explain to their staff. He talked about critical thinking skills. He talked about work environments and these things. How did they rate these? Because I would like to be able to explain to somebody, unless the HR department is going to explain to every single person in the whole city why they ranked, what they, how they got to that, they arrived at their numbers. But I think those are super important that we get all those. We want to be able to compare positions internally as well. And the cleaner ended up telling me I might apply it to go to the city hall because it pays more. So I don't know, just some more things that I would like to see out of this is ways that I can, as a manager, can explain these things to my staff. Or if Detman or if the HR person is going to do that, that's fine. But somebody needs to be able to explain the details of how they arrived at their position. So thank you.
Thank you. Before I jump to the next subject, any questions, comments from committee members?
About this, about him.
Either way.
Actually, I concur. That's why I want Carlson Detman here. I mean, we can read stuff on a piece of paper. I want to talk to the human being whose mind processed it. So get him in here.
I'll take that as doubling down on item,
Yes.
or bullet point number 2.
Yes.
On communication in general, so, again, if we aren't attaching concrete items to these ideas, they can be considered, but in the end, there's not going to be a deliverable for it. Do we have any other asks as a committee? Alder Feldy?
I'd also like Carlton Detman here to explain some of the stuff to us, but it doesn't say anything about the seniority at all in the report. You know, there may be somebody that's here 36 years and because they're at the top of their scale, they're not going to make anything, and that's kind of disheartening to that employee that, you know, everybody else is getting a raise around them, but because he's got longevity, she is not going to get anything. So that's a deep concern if we want to keep those long-term employees.
Thank you. Any other discussion or in the communication area? Alder Perella?
I'm not clear about that. So we should have a specific item connected with this, correct? Are we going to have a proposal on this item? Are we going to propose to have a committee group, or are we going to task the HR? So in order to enhance, develop, give the opportunity of more communications to clarify many of these aspects, are we going to verify whether it is possible to have a group with an HR professional and the firm to work together with the managers, department heads, and so on, to review some discrepancies besides or before the appeal process, if that will ever happen? So I would like to see that that is a specific item that we are going to pass on, propose. Are we going to do that?
Wow.
Go ahead.
Great. I have a question. I keep thinking Carlson Detman comes in and we hear the detail. I would be agreeable with that if it was after they made the presentation here. It may not be necessary. He or she may have a different avenue to go down. I don't mind doing that, but I think I would not do that as a first step. I would wait to see what comes next in the next step. And then if we still feel like it needs to be done, that's what we ask to have done.
So it is fine to put it like that. The only problem, I have a concern with that, which is if we want to create that opportunity for the discussion that Director Bibo and Garrett mentioned,
Okay.
I hardly envision that happening on the level of the Finance and Personnel Committee, right? So, and that is the type of opportunity that I would like to create, the opportunity of going over those discrepancies in a thorough way besides the appeal process. So that would not happen at the level of the committee. So if we want to postpone that specific possible action to the next Finance and Personnel meeting, that is fine with me. But personally, I think that that's what we need. Besides the clarifications that the firm can give us on their generic approach, but they will not get into the details and the weeds of the specific questions of the specific departments.
I agree. Chair, if I...
Director Krieger.
I will just add that Patrick from Carlson Detman is prepared to already meet with, for example, Director Biebel and Director Erickson about the concerns that they have. So if that's the direction, we just, to an extent, there was the document that was put out in public as the proposed scale. As staff, I personally didn't feel comfortable going to and changing things before council had even a discussion about it. So that could be on me when it comes down to it on the order of things. But I have, since the item went public, I have now an email, for example, from Director Biebel that we can go over at any point. I can set up a meeting with him and Patrick from Carlson Detman. I can schedule something with the library and Carlson Detman to go over those concerns. But if the direction of this committee is to not do that without HR involvement, that's where I am taking a step back, because I don't want to overstep or do something that is not the wish of the committee.
And I suppose I will pose that question to the committee then. Is having the consultant sit with department heads and review concerns and go over methodology, data, so on, something that we would be comfortable with if there's no specialist or HR director in place just yet? Mayor.
Now, I don't want to speak on behalf of all the department heads, but I guess I will. I get the sense from conversations that I've had that they feel comfortable that they can move forward and that they can speak in their expertise for their department in this aspect without waiting for an HR director. So I know some directors are here, and if, I think they would generally agree with that sentiment, that they're the best advocates and experts in their realm, and they can kind of, hold their own weight, so to say, in that aspect. So to keep this moving for the sake of keeping it moving, I guess, and just having unnecessarily times waiting, I think that's the sentiment of the committee, that would be a good way to move forward. So just wanted to throw in that.
Thank you for the comments. And so we're discussion only. I guess I'll ask one more time, is there any feeling among the committee that that is not a direction we want to go with, or are we all? Alder Bravo?
I think that we need an HR professional to own the process. If we feel that we don't, I would agree that for the sake of time, that we could, instead of waiting for the HR director being a new HR director being operative, to have an HR specialist doing it. But I think that an HR professional with the right experience should own the process, should be able to look at the process, even at this stage, as a whole, as a vision of the project as a whole. So I think that is important for the quality of the discussion and for the level of communication as well. That has to happen in those meetings.
Thank you. Since we have some division on the committee, I'll just speak for myself. I don't necessarily disagree with any of that. I much prefer that there is a solid structure behind every process. However, in this case, echoing the mayor's comments, keeping us moving forward, not to mention if our department heads are all feeling like they want to be having these meetings with the consultant and nobody is asking that we wait until there's also an HR director. I have full faith in our department heads. I would be a lot more concerned with telling everybody why they're all wrong. I try not to do that. And in theory, these aren't necessarily mutually exclusive or exclusive. Hopefully, we have either our specialist or a HR director in soon on the ground, helping with the final refinement and rollout of this process. But I don't want to make that a sticking point of continuing to move forward and having all of those conversations. The longer we wait to start them, the more amount of time it's going to take until we have a final product. Alder Ackley.
So I've been quiet and I've been listening to what everybody's been saying before I said something. But I do feel like, Trey, I think you're making sense with saying, we do need to move forward. We need to be thinking about our employees. We definitely should be having faith in our department heads. And it seemed like, especially at the previous council meeting, we were bogging ourselves down in the weeds and we were attempting to oversee the directors and what they're already doing in their work. And that's not our place. Our job is to just, kind of oversee what everybody's decisions are, but it's not our place to micromanage the directors. It's not our place to micromanage the mayor or the city administrator. So I feel like we do need to move forward. We need to go forward in good faith and good trust with our directors. But I do think, some of the directors, if they have questions, if they have problems, then they should have access to discuss those feelings, and get some clarity and some understanding for their employees. But and for the sake of time, I'm concerned that if we sit on this too long, we're going to have a financial nightmare pretty soon. So I think that we do need to push forward. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments generally? Looking through our list of items that were in the IFC, and we don't just have to focus on those points, but I'm just kind of using that as a guide as we go. It seems like pretty much every other bullet point was somewhat rolled into the conversations we've already had.
I do have a question on one of them, if I can get some direction on the recognition of staff seniority in the implementation plan. We had a proposed plan for implementation that would put anybody with 5 years of experience at the control point. What I'm asking the committee is, would it be beneficial to have scenarios spelt out? For example, if I'm just really making things up right now, so don't quote me on these later. If you have it that 15 years, you're at a step 14, 10 years, you're at a step 9, for example, and have it so that there is some space in between, and we can, it would be a little bit of work on this is my part, on the finance side to make sure that we're still coming to a number that we can afford in the end. But would that be something to have different scenarios put out there so that you can understand from your point of view and from your chair to see what you would be more agreeable to, I guess is my question.
That hits on the final bullet point, the financial impact on the city's budget. I do think it would be helpful for context to have some alternatives to how the approach could be, just at least to make them tangible as we're considering what is the best option for implementation. I'll pass it on to Alder Flicky-Paneski.
I am remembering there are categories and there are steps. And the steps already take into account things like education and seniority, do they not?
Not necessarily. So, for example, I'm just going to, again, make things up. If I was on between a 2 and a 3 right now, I would be placed at a 3 because I only have 1 year of experience here. So I'm not necessarily at the bottom of the scale. So the steps are not taking into consideration with this implementation necessarily the full seniority of somebody. If I was between a step 2 and a 3 but had 10 years of experience, I'd only go to a step 5 with how it was proposed. I did have this actually on a sheet that would have made it, if my computer was working right, I would bring it up. But let's say, for example, I'm between a 7 and an 8 currently 1 year of experience here, I would go to an 8. So there could be individuals who with my longevity, I'm at a step 8, but a person who has 14 years of experience, for example, could be at a step 5. So there's no way to necessarily make it exactly fair unless we do the full implementation of steps considering the tenure here, and that was the $1.2 million cost. So that's where I'm offering the option, if you would like me to go through the process of analyzing all of the information to give a stepped version so that people would have the possibility of having that tenure factored into what step they get placed on for implementation. I would say from the education standpoint, that would have come in place with the JDQ for the most part, based on the experience required, but there are plenty of positions within the city that have more than what is required of them as the minimum. We have nothing at this moment to take that into consideration.
Well, I am remembering that we are defining the job position and not the person in the job at this point in time. So if we do steps, if we do all of that, would Carlson Detman say that's part of their process?
So they have provided a document to me that allows me, it's a huge data dump that has everybody's year of service that they began, what step they would get or what grade they would get placed onto. So the actual different pay bands that are on the schedule, what grade they fall into. And from there, it's a matter of what council decides for implementation to account for those different other items like the tenure and things. If we want to have some data where if you have a master's degree but only require a bachelor's degree, that would take me a little bit of time to get, I'm sure, but I think the department heads would help me on that. But the position itself is placed on a grade based on what the JDQ was filled out as of what is required of that job and what duties that person does. It had nothing to do with the person that's in that position. Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on that one from the committee? All in agreement? Alder Perrella?
I'm still trying to think about, so how can we address this? Seniority is one of the aspects that we received a lot of feedback about. I think that we should pause a moment and to reflect on how to address that. I understand that it would be the most expensive version of the implementation of this grade scale. That's clear. But shall we pause a moment and see, are there ways that we could implement this more expensive version of, could that be implemented incrementally instead of implemented all at once? So how can we address that?
And I do believe that was the intention. We did not want to make any promises to any employees because it is completely financially dependent on if the funds are there. But there had been discussion at points where if we implement to July 10th, for example, how we were discussing, where all go to the control point with more than 5 years of experience, that in, let's say, 2 years, we could have it a goal of the budget team to make sure that if somebody has 15 years, we're bumping them up to step X, whatever that may be. That had been a discussion at a point, but that, again, I didn't want to say too much and have people thinking that that would happen or guarantee that that would happen, because it really does come down to if the money is there, if that's possible.
I'm probably going to completely butcher this, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, when we're talking about steps versus grades, it was grades 1 through 24 vertically on that chart, and then the steps are across?
Correct.
So with seniority in particular, because the grade is related to the actual position itself, there wouldn't be vertical movement at all, correct? It would just perhaps change which step an individual holding a particular position would fall within in their grade?
Correct. So if somebody is on, and again, making things up here, so for ease of explanation, if somebody's on a step 4 and it goes $20 to $25 is the pay band that is now associated with that step, they could make anywhere in between there, but based on what the implementation is, they might end up at $22.50. Or if they're lower on the scale at this moment and they don't have the longevity to get to the control point, they might end up at $21. So that's where the seniority usually takes place. It's not going to bump them up to a different grade. It would be that they're still within the pay band that was determined by the market rate.
Thank you. I'll take that as I didn't screw it up too bad.
No, you're good.
Do we have any other thoughts on this one? Otherwise, is the committee comfortable with asking for maybe an alternative just to get some perspective on what changing these things around would look like in the big picture for the plan?
Alternative to 5, 10, 15.
As an alternative, I guess, to the draft proposal that we had in front of us previously.
Which was that an individual goes to the next step based on where they are today. But if a person is here 5 years or more, they'd at least get to a step 5. So if somebody has 15 years of experience, they're between a 2 and a 3, they would at least get to the 5 because they have more than 5 years of experience at the city. That was the original proposal. I can see if I can get my thing to come up here.
Yeah. Yeah, I want Carlson Detman here.
No, I had
I've got
a thing in my drive that showed a couple different scenarios. But my computer doesn't like being undocked
You
anymore.
had talked about, a 5-year longevity and a 10-year longevity in
Yes.
showing us the scenarios for 5 years and 10 years.
Yep,
Is
so,
that what you were addressing?
sure, so I was
Okay.
thinking that an additional, or an alternative that I could provide to the committee is that there'd be different steps based on those longevity years, those big years, 20, 10, 15, however you decide, or I guess how I will look at it is how I can make it work with somewhat of the same dollar amount, so that we have some way to afford it still. So that was just me kind of spitting out an idea of if that would be helpful to help understand what the cost and how that would be changing with different variables. That's
yes.
where I was asking if that'd be helpful.
Yes. And you said yes. That would be
Yes.
helpful. Perfect.
And now I have one concurring, and it sounds like we are in somewhat of agreement as a committee. And then I guess I would just ask first, Director Krieger, were there any other points that you were looking for more clarification from us?
None come to mind at the moment.
Fair. Then I will ask committee as well, were there any other items, perhaps not on this nice bullet pointed list, that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, I apologize, but I did not get what the Director of Finance meant. I don't understand, as of right now, I don't understand how that alternative could look like. Sorry, I just didn't get it. So going back, if I may, to the idea of the seniority. So in which way, again, we can improve that? So how can we look at the grades versus the steps to be more reflective of the actual years of seniority of employees?
If you don't mind my jumping in quick on that one and telling me if I get anything wrong. The proposal, or the draft proposal that we had in front of us, The step that any individual employee was placed on was going to be the next above their current pay rate, or at least the control point, the fifth step, if they've been here for 5 years or more, so that 5-year milestone was going to be a minimum. My understanding for any proposals would be trying to go further than just that 5-year milestone and having 10, 15-year milestones as well. So if you've been here for 10, you'd be placed on the step that is one above your current salary and at least step 10. I'm interested to see how the numbers all work out on there.
Yeah, I do think, well, I can tell you right now, 5 years would then no longer be at the control point, because in order to save some money to pay for the additional increases for others, 5 years would no longer be the minimum. It would have to be adjusted downward somehow. But again, that's a bit more of an analysis that I have not had a chance to do. But I'm more than willing to do that. But I'm not sure if we're using the same terms, Alder Perella. So the steps are going to be attached to the position no matter what they're making. So if I'm if I'm a grade 3 and I'll fall onto a step somewhere in that band, even if I do more, even if I have 30 years of experience and I have a degree that is more than what that position requires, my position still would fall on that grade 3. So you're not going to move different grades, it's just the steps within that grade. So just want to make sure I'm explaining that clearly.
Right, so the proposal that we're asking for, either for context or for consideration, would be something that is taking seniority more into account to give us context of what those numbers would look like overall. Any other comments?
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. Yeah, that is clear. And I don't think we should compare, for example, the educational, what is not required with seniority, because those are two completely different things. What is not required is not required. They may have it, that's good, but it's not required. But seniority is all a different matter in this case. So I think that we should take that into consideration in a different way. So yes, thank you.
Thank you. Alder Feldy?
If you look at the RO, it has a list of all of the things that they wanted. The below items have been communicated for staff to address. And pretty much everything that we've just talked about here, including the seniority. So I think if we send this as it is, accept it as it is and send it there, we're going to put it to staff and get their okay, and then it'll come to council. Okay.
Thank you. And as long as there are no other questions for clarification, I do believe we did perhaps make some of these thoughts more tangible. Look forward to seeing what comes of our next discussion.
Okay, do we have to act on this?
I don't think we need an action on this one, so I'll move on to item number 10, barring any objection. All right, and item number 10 is direct referral of resolution number 33 of 2223, a resolution authorizing entering into a development agreement with Sheboygan Southpointe Development LLC.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a document that was reviewed and an offer to purchase back in March to sell 14.7 acres of land in the Southpointe Enterprise Campus on the corner of South Business Drive and Horizon Drive, which is next to the water tower that's out there. This is to build a spec industrial building with a developer out of Appleton that would put up a 100,000 square foot building. And then ultimately, if they're successful, either a 50,000 or $100,000 square foot addition to it. we had originally negotiated some TIF incentive to deal with gaps in their pro forma, particularly related to construction costs. So we would be selling the land to them at $367,500. The city will collect that payment and hold it, and then once they pull a building permit, we will pay that back to them as part of the incentive up front, if you will. And they will be using that as capital as they go out to finalize their whole financing plan. And then we would pay the difference up to a maximum of $1,580,000, or 20% of the total project cost of $7.9 million. So the max we would pay out is the $1.58 million. And then, but we would pay the $367,000 that they're paying up front back to them once they move forward with the project, so they can use that in their equity stack, especially with interest rates increasing and the unstable market related to construction costs. So I think, we've struggled to get the first development out there, and, hopefully we've got a couple other successful potential leads in the pipeline that hopefully will be moving forward. But I think getting the first building going, especially at this prominent location, makes sense. And we know that there's a demand in the market for industrial and or warehousing because there's not a lot of availability. So I think the timing is right and it makes a lot of sense. It's just that there's a lot of risk in doing a deal like this because they don't have a tenant lined up yet.
Questions or comments? Alder Perrella?
I'm just curious, I wasn't able to understand and through reading the document, they will look for one or more tenants, right? It's not.
Correct.
It could be multiple.
It could be multiple. They could do 3 30,000 square foot tenants, or they could do 1 or 2 50s or whatever. So they're basically just building the shell, and then they're going to start marketing and find the tenant to go into the shell. Or tenants.
Any other discussion? Alder Flicky-Paneski?
I think it's a very creative thing to do, and I'm all in favor of it.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Sounds like a great opportunity for the park to me. If there's no more further discussion, we'll be looking for a motion to approve this one.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have motion and a second then. Seeing no other discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye. The ayes have it and the motion passes. Our next regularly scheduled meeting will be on July 11th. And with that, we have exhausted our agenda and are looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye. The ayes have it and the motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for a detailed discussion today.
Thank you.
Very detailed.